Shalom. We are continuing our class on Israel, God's answer to skeptics. This class is lesson 4 in our study. The nation of Israel, the Jewish people, I believe is the best argument on why the God of Israel is the one true God, why the Bible is the Word of God. It is actually, I believe, God's apologetic. Now, the challenge of God in Isaiah chapter 40, 12 through 31, was to the Jewish people. In Isaiah chapter 41, in verses 1 through 7, God addresses the Gentiles of the world. Now, he does to both groups the same thing. He presents himself as the omniscient, all-knowing, the omnipotent, all-powerful, omnipresent, all-present, God of the universe. That's to both Jew and Gentile. And the challenge is to all people, Jew and Gentile, to believe in the God of Israel, not the impotent false gods of the world. In biblical days, those false gods would be Baal, Dagon, Marduk, others. The false gods of the world today, Allah, the God of Mormonism, the God of the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is not the Jehovah of the Bible, and so on. Now, this lesson, we will look at God's apologetic, that he is the one true God. God's argument, if you will. God's reason why you should accept him as the one true God. God's apologetic. Israel is God's apologetic to skeptics, to followers of other gods. And he uses Israel to show that he alone is God. There is no other. In verses 8 through 19 of Isaiah 41, what we have is a synopsis of the history of Israel. Now, the rest of the Bible, at least from Genesis 12 and on, Old and New Testament, give us much detail, a lot of prophecies about the nation of Israel. But what we have here in verses 8 through 19 is an overview, a synopsis, a summary of the history of Israel. Number 1, we are going to see the choosing of Israel, verses 8 and 9. Secondly, we're going to see the conflict of Israel, verses 11 and 12. Third, the conservation of Israel, in verses 10, 13, and 14. Finally, we will see the consummation of Israel, God's final plan for them, in verses 15 through 19. So in verses 8 through 19, we have an overview, a synopsis of the entire history of Israel, from their choosing or calling to the finalization of God's plan for the Jewish people and the nation of Israel. The choosing of Israel, verses 8 and 9. But thou, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. Thou whom I have taken from the ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto thee, Thou art my servant. I have chosen thee, and not cast thee away. Israel, here is God's servant. God chose the Jewish people, the nation of Israel they would become, to work out his plan and purpose for the world. He did not choose the Jewish people that all of them would go to heaven. It's a personal choice, receiving the Messiah. But he chose them to work out his plan and his purpose for the world. And since he has chosen them, the Jewish people, who ultimately would become the nation of Israel, he will not cast them away. So initially we have the choosing of Israel. Then we are told in verses 11 and 12 that the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, will have continuous conflict. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing. They that strive with thee shall perish. Thou shalt seek them and shalt not find them, even them that contended with thee. They that war against thee shall be as nothing, as a thing of naught. Continual conflict. Listen to what it says. All they that were incensed against thee, they that strive with thee, they that contended with thee, they that war against thee. It's been the history of Israel. If you know anything about the Jewish people and the nation of Israel, it has been one conflict after another. The third promise about the history of Israel is that you will have the conservation of Israel. God will conserve them, keep them. Verses 10, 13, and 14. God says to the Jewish people, to the nation, Fear thou not, I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee. Fear not, thou worm Jacob, and ye men of Israel. I will help thee, saith the Lord, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. In verse 10, Israel and the Jewish people are told, Fear not. In verse 13, they are told, Fear not. In verse 14, Fear not. See, their history will be one of conflict, one of pharaohs and Haman and Herod and the pogroms and the Hitlers of the world, and ultimately the Antichrist being used by Satan to destroy the Jewish people. But God's promise is you will not be destroyed. Fear not, because I am thy God. I will be with thee. I will uphold thee. And so they were chosen of God for a purpose. They will have conflict because Satan wants to destroy them. That's the bottom line when it comes to anti-Semitism. It's satanic, whatever form it takes. But God says, I will conserve thee. I will keep thee. So fear not. And then you have the consummation of Israel. In verses 15 and 16, it's figurative language. Behold, I will make thee a new sharp threshing instrument having teeth. Thou shalt thresh the mountains and beat them small, and shall make the hills as chaff. Thou shalt fan them, and the wind shall carry them away, and the whirlwind shall scatter them. And then thou shalt rejoice in the Lord, and shalt glory in the Holy One of Israel. It starts out by speaking of the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, as a new sharp threshing instrument. A threshing machine separates the wheat from the chaff. It separates the good from the bad. In the Olivet Discourse and in Matthew 25, you have the ultimate fulfillment of Genesis 12:3, I'll bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. You'll find those two thoughts in the latter part of Matthew chapter 25 after the 10 virgins that's talked about, that parable. And you're blessed if you treat the Jewish people properly. That's the brethren there of Jesus. You're cursed if you don't. And what it is saying there is that The anti-Semitism, the satanic delusion, the satanic attack in the tribulation period will be of such an extent that the only ones that will help the Jewish people will be born-again believers. In the Holocaust, you had non-born-again people helping the Jewish people. But the tribulation period is so much worse as Satan attempts to destroy them his final and last time. Well, there is one more time, the end of the millennial kingdom. But the threshing instrument is the Jewish people. That how you respond to them, meaning if you're born again, you'll be favorable and bless them. If you're not born again, you'll curse the Jewish people. They will be that threshing instrument. And the blessed will ultimately go into God's kingdom, and the cursed will not. It shows who is truly saved and who is truly not. These verses speak of the 7-year tribulation period. A threshing instrument divides the wheat from the chaff, the good from the bad. Matthew 25 has the Jewish people being the dividing line, if you will, between being blessed or cursed. Matthew 25:40, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. The brethren there again are the Jewish people. And then in verses 17 through 19 it says this: when the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue fails for thirst, I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open rivers in high places, fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the shittim tree, the myrtle, and the oil tree. I will set in the desert the fir tree and the pine and the box tree together. See, where verses 15 and 16 speak of the tribulation period, now what these verses 17 through 19 speak of is the coming millennial kingdom, the reign of the Messiah, when the wilderness will blossom as a rose, when Jesus, the Messiah, will rule over planet Earth. And so what we have in verses 15 through 19 is the consummation of God's plan for Israel. First tribulation, but then triumph, the kingdom, and reigning with the Messiah. So why does God do this? Because Israel and God's purpose for her is that the world, Jew and Gentile, might understand that the God of Israel is the one true God. Look at what verse 20 says. That they may see and know and consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord hath done this. The Holy One of Israel hath created it. The they are the Jewish people of Isaiah 40, 12 through 31, following after false gods, other religions. And the Gentiles of Isaiah 41, 1 through 7, who are also following after false gods, other religions, and not the God of Israel. So God in verses 8 through 19 gives an overview of the nation of Israel, the prophecy of what will happen in that nation, among the people, the Jewish people. And again, the rest of the scripture gives very detailed prophecies about these things. Why does he do this? That all those who follow after other gods, Jew or Gentile, may see. If you understand, or if you see the Jewish people, you'll know it's the God of Israel who has done it. You'll then have to consider, where do I fit in with this powerful God? And you'll understand that I must do whatever I must do to get right with the God of Israel. See, the they being addressed here are the Jewish people and the Gentile people who follow after other gods. Jews and Gentiles following false gods, false religions, and they are challenged to consider the history of Israel and the Jewish people. And there are 4 progressive thoughts given for them to consider about Israel and the Jewish people. See, Mark Twain, in that quote we had, what is the secret of his immortality? Well, the secret of the immortality of the Jewish people is God, the God of Israel. And if you see Israel, you will know that there's something outside of them, the God of Israel, who has sustained them. You will know it's him. And then you're going to consider, where do I fit in if I'm following another God? And you're going to understand that I must do whatever I have to do to get right with this God of Israel. 4 progressive thoughts. To see the Jew in their history is to realize that they are unique to this world. When Frederick the Great of Prussia challenged a believer in his court to prove the truth of the Bible and God, his God, he astutely replied, his answer, the Jews. To know, to see the nation of Israel and her history, as well as her people, is to know that it is only explained supernaturally. Her continued existence is not explained by luck, coincidence, or any other means of this nature. God brought Israel into existence and has promised to keep her. You're going to consider. To see Israel is to know that the God of the Bible has done this miraculous work. At this point, one will have to consider what his relationship is to this sovereign God of the universe. If the God of Israel is so powerful to bring these things to pass and to judge not only individuals, but nations that contradict his will, the natural consideration will be for oneself. What will happen to me in light of this holy, powerful God? Then you're going to understand. The final realization of this process is that the God of Israel is the true God of this universe. The understanding is that he is the one I need to listen to and obey. Thomas Newton, British clergyman in the 1700s, said this: the preservation of the Jews is really one of the most signal and illustrious acts of divine providence. And what but a supernatural power could have preserved them in such a manner as none other nation upon earth has been preserved? Nor is the providence of God less remarkable in the destruction of their enemies than in their preservation. We see that the great empires, which in their turn subdued and oppressed the people of God, are all come to ruin. And if such had been the fatal end of the enemies and oppressors of the Jews, let it serve as a warning to all those who at any time or upon any occasion are for raising a clamor and persecution against them. Israel is God's apologetic to the world, with many of the children of Israel following false gods, as well as Gentiles of the world following false gods. Israel and her history, past, present, future, is the witness, the apologetic he gives as to why he, the God of Israel, is the one true God. Now, the next lesson, we'll continue to see what God does as he gives a challenge to those who follow other gods to produce evidence that the God they follow is the one true God. Until then, shalom.